Well, hello everybody. I know you probably haven't heard me in a while, or maybe not haven't ever heard me if you've only seen the videos that I have on my channel at the moment, but with this whole pandemic thing going on, I decided that it might be a good idea to start doing things again, even if they aren't videos like they used to be, if they're just... Well, I've decided that I've started to play some more games here lately, because I've had a lot more free time on my hands, no one to talk to, Not like I had many people to talk to before anyway, but we'll ignore that. The big thing is that lately I've been playing a lot more games, and I figured why not share a little bit of what I've been thinking about with all of you. I'm not the best guy when it comes to playing card games, but I've always been very involved in a lot of them. I was a real big guy into non-trading card games, just regular like casino games for a while. I guess you'd just call them card games, wouldn't you? And I used to really be into that. I haven't been into that as much lately, but in my youth I was part of a big group into it, and I've never really given up on it. It's just I've found that games like Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering are far more interesting to me here. Here in this first game, you see we're playing against Pirate Warrior, rank 6 silver. Yes, the prestigious rank. I'm a very good player at this game. Anyway, I don't know what this guy was doing. He was just kind of... His deck didn't seem to work really well, and his plays didn't really make sense. You'll probably see that as we get on, but that's not important. Anyway, I found it very interesting how Hearthstone and Magic have continued to develop since I originally started playing them, because I have been playing Magic for around 5 years and Hearthstone probably for around 3 or 4. And I definitely have my preference. You'll probably pick that up throughout this video, but I wanted to talk about them a little bit. Hearthstone, despite being the game that you see on my screen here, is not my preferred game. It just happens to be a little bit easier to play when you're stuck in your room 24/7, because if you go outside you'll die. But the game is decently enjoyable. I find that a lot of elements of it I'm not as big of a fan of as I am of games like Magic the Gathering. I haven't ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, but I imagine it doesn't work like Hearthstone does, in the sense that it has very limited selection of cards and like abilities to choose from, and it results in a game that is quite often more limited than you would like it to be. I don't understand why this guy was trading as much as he was here. If he was playing a pirate deck, which he is, I think he would have either tried to go with a more aggressive start, which I guess he wasn't able to do because he didn't draw into his 1-drops. But if he isn't going to go for an aggressive start, I don't see why he hit the face with the 2-1 weapon if he knew that I could trade in as easily as I could. It just seemed like he had some all-around bad ideas there, but it only gets worse as this game goes on. But no hate to Death Pro here. I did enjoy the game. It was probably one of the most fun games I had in this video, but that harkens back to a problem I have in general with Hearthstone, in that no matter what you do throughout the game or while you're making your deck or whatever, there's only like slight advantages you can really get in there. What is your best win rate going to realistically be? It's probably going to hover around 60% at best, really, if you're playing with people of relatively equal skill levels. And that's just not as fun to play. There's less variety in the kinds of game that you can really have with Hearthstone as opposed to with Magic or something like that. That really comes down to the limitations of having this few proper cards and characters to play with. I mean, Magic, there's only 5 colors to work with, and there's 9 classes in Hearthstone, and it's been around longer, but the number of cards released in each set for Magic seems to just be so much more advanced than there are in Hearthstone. The options in Hearthstone are consistently limited, and this guy's attacking last at the end of his turn here, drawing his card at the end. A very clever decision on his part. I don't know if he ended up being punished. And you'll see he was going to target my face with that Cabal Lackey. I don't understand why he played it here even. It seems like it would have been much better to go make a different play. Maybe he got another Cabal Lackey as that card from his weapon, which would have been a lot better if he had saved it, and then he could have killed my 4/5 who kind of dominated the board for these next couple of turns. If he'd played that better, I might have been put to a lot more hassle. His 6/5 would have contested anything I played, and it would be difficult to attack into. And he had a weapon which could have been the tempo advantage he needed. Also, this attack didn't make much sense to me. I don't know why he decided to attack it with the charge and the Moshog Announcer. It seems like it would have been a much better idea to attack with the Moshog Announcer in his face, and then he could use the charge to kill off a unit and survive, and I wouldn't have had lethal on the board if he had done that anyway. And I'm playing a priest. How much burst does he realistically expect me to have? But this game was pretty much wrapped up from this point on anyway, you know. I don't think there was really any way he could get back from this position, and I was playing a deck that definitely had a lot more top end than him, and I had a lot of card advantage on him. The Arcanite Reaper might have done it. As we'll see later, he had a lot of burst in his hand, but ultimately it didn't make a huge impact because I had drawn Harrison, my trump card, you know. I was considering putting in Acidic Swamp Ooze instead of Harrison, but I decided against it mainly because in the kind of matchups you were going to be facing, there are two kinds that you were realistically going to be going against. Warriors, playing Galakron Warrior or Pirate Warrior, and other matchups like against Mage or the Priest Mirror. And between the two, in the Mage and Priest Mirror, you definitely don't want to be drawing cards, but Harrison isn't going to draw you a card, and a 5/4 body just inherently has a little bit more it has going for it than a 3/2. And in those kind of matchups, every bit of value you can get definitely counts. And against a warrior, typically it's not going to go down to fatigue in most cases. The Galakron hero power ensures that, and the normal pirate warrior's entire strategy involves around never getting to fatigue. So it's unlikely that Harrison was ever going to cause a problem with drawing cards in those matchups. And against other matchups like Warlock and Druid, a 3/2 or a 4 or a 5/4 is going to be terrible, but you might as well at least try. As you can see here, he had 12 burst, which is kind of like a mage, and running double Mortal Strike is not something I was expecting out of him, but he might have been able to win with that. I don't know. Considering the way he played, he might have been trying to play based on that in mind. I have no idea. I don't really know what he was actually going for. But anyway, back to what I was saying about Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. I definitely prefer Magic the Gathering. It has much more variety, as I said before, but I also have been recently getting into Commander, which has really shown me something about Magic that you can't really get with Hearthstone, which is how fun the environment can be. I opened a pack here, got 3 rares, 1 golden rare. It helped me craft another card I needed for my priest deck because I refused to spend any money on this account. So I went ahead and crafted one of the last cards that I need for this deck. Here's the full deck list here. I might have to start running a deck tracker if I plan to keep making these videos, but I decided to trade out a Holy Nova for a Breath of the Infinite, because even though I'm not running very many dragons, the 1 mana discount can be a pretty huge deal when you're dealing against aggressive decks. And the 2 life gain from Holy Nova is almost negligible. In Magic and Commander, there's a much more casual environment, unless you're playing CEDH, but if you're doing that, you have very different priorities than me. But if you're playing Hearthstone, you are basically forced to play to win, because in order to succeed, in order to get new cards without paying an exorbitant amount of money, the only real option is to maximize the amount of money you get per hour playing or per game. And that kind of mathematical way of looking at the game is terrible, in my opinion. It doesn't support what you're trying to do at all, and it definitely makes it more difficult than necessary to enjoy it. You're forced to play the most competitive decks. Everyone is playing the same like 3 or 4 decks at any given time on ranked. And casual isn't a real mode in Hearthstone. People don't really play casual except for new players, and that's a mistake to do. It's a waste of time. The mode I probably have the most fun with in that respect is Arena, because while it is moderately competitive, it also, well, it's not really moderately competitive. Everyone in there is playing to win as well. But the problem with so few options isn't nearly as big of a deal as it is with ranked ladder. Now here we're playing against a aggressive hunter. I didn't play this game very well. I had Breath of the Infinite in my hand the entire game, and I definitely should have cast it earlier than I did. I simply, my options were pretty bad here, too. My opponent was playing very well, and he kept on curve extraordinarily well, and I just didn't have the right answers. I probably should have played Breath of the Infinite here and gone into a Devoted Maniac the next turn, or into a Shield of Galakrond into the next turn. That probably would have saved me a lot more. But I decided instead to go with Devoted Maniac here because of mana efficiency, and it didn't have enough power to deal with the real threat on board. It didn't really save me any life, and it didn't give me a card that was worth getting either, but that's more RNG than anything. So at this point I had pretty much already lost the game, but I kept trying. The hope was that Sand of Waterbearer would be able to gain me enough life to get me back in, but with the encroaching leper gnomes, I didn't have very many options. Plus, the 2 secrets was a little worrying to play into. I don't really know that deck list very well to know exactly what secrets they would be, so I assumed, although it was unlikely, that there might be a snipe, but I decided to just play Shield of Galakrond anyway. I figured snipe was pretty unlikely in a deck that would be as aggressive as that one. I knew one was Explosive Trap. I didn't know what the other one was. Jeez, my chair. I used to have such a nice chair in my room, but now that this whole Cygnus thing has started happening, I've just been stuck in this terrible chair, forced to go to online meetings for everything I'm supposed to do, and it just gets wholly uncomfortable. I'm sure that a lot of you can probably relate to that. So, as we're continuing through this game here, our opponent is taking quite a moment to figure out what to do. He's got a Life Drinker. It's a decent card in the situation. Dwarven Sharpshooter is a 1-mana 1/3. As I said before, this game was pretty much over. I didn't have a way to come back from this, and when he used his hero power the next turn, just the leper gnomes by themselves would probably have been enough to deal with me. I should have played Explosive Trap here in retrospect. I should have Explosive Trapped and probably thrown in the Breath of the Infinite with it in order to clean up the board a little bit more than it was. I did not expect Freezing Trap. I definitely should have, but I did not play around it correctly. And playing the Convincing Infiltrator here just didn't do enough to seal in the game. He was going to be able to hero power it, and the leper gnomes weren't going to matter if they died. They were planning on dying anyway. So it really wasn't ideal of a play for me. It was a bad decision. I was hoping that the next turn I could play the Explosive Trap from his hand again and follow it up, but that opportunity did not arise. I got an Arcane Shot instead, which you're about to see here in a second. Breath of the Infinite would have almost killed me here too by itself, which is kind of fantastic. And there's the second Life Drinker, and my chances at winning were pretty much non-existent at this point. I contemplated what I could do to come back from this, but no matter what I came up with, there was no way I was going to survive this turn. If I played Sand of Waterbearer and healed, he would just have enough damage. And if I played Breath of the Infinite, and then I couldn't afford to play anything else relevant, I could Breath of the Infinite, Arcane Shot, the 3/3, but then he would have had enough damage left on me to win the game from there, because he already had an Arcane Shot in his hand, and that's why I decided to just go ahead and concede here. I didn't have much of an opportunity. I'm not going to blame myself for that one, though. That was definitely a very, very poor game on my part. I played it very poorly. I considered making out some changes, because if I was going to be playing against decks like that, some of my cards weren't very good. Looking over the deck, Again, I decided not to make anything significant change. In the future, I'm probably going to take out the Shadow Ward Deaths because there's few targets that I would like them to hit, and I'll probably exchange them for things that can deal with enemies early. Maybe a Pain. I'm not exactly certain on that one. I'll release the full deck list with this video if anyone's interested, but I don't imagine you would be with my low-level play. I'm not exactly great at this game, but I'm working on it, you know. I've been playing it for a long time, and I'm still not as good as I would like to be. I still don't have enough cards to actually make decks for more than 1 or 2 classes at a time. So my Priest deck I've been working on for a while. I had the classic Galakron Rogue deck as well, but I don't enjoy playing it very much. Whenever you win, it feels kind of cheaty, and whenever you lose, it feels like you didn't have much of a choice. Even though it is a very good deck, I will admit, I was missing some key parts from it as well. Namely, I don't own an Edwin, and I don't have enough dust saved up to make a legendary. I've been trying not to over invest too much while we're getting ready for the next expansion. But if given the opportunity, after this whole Hearthstone thing, if I can ever get back to my social life the way it was before, I would definitely start playing a little bit more Magic again. I think that it's a lot more enjoyable to have the community aspect with Magic that you don't get in Hearthstone. When you can play with your friends and be casual and make janky decks that don't really work all the way, but it's still an acceptable way to play, that's just fun. But in Hearthstone, that's not an option, as said before. Here we're playing against a Zoo deck, one of my favorite kind of decks to play. And I knew the matchup well just from playing the other end of it as much as I have. I think that my deck was really tuned well to fight against Zoo. I had the double Breath of the Infinite early. I have the general Galakron package is decent at handling it. I think my chances of losing in this matchup are pretty low unless I don't get my removal. As you can see here, Breath of the Infinite, an extraordinarily good card against Zoo in general. Voidwalker here, trade with my minion, and it doesn't stand a chance. My opponent's down to 3 cards. I'm up to 5 on him, but he does have life tap, which is a huge deal, but that shouldn't have been too much of a problem. He may be able to get more cards, but the cards in my deck have so much more value naturally associated with them. Another Flame Imp, very aggressive play. At this point, my opponent has done 9 damage to himself, I believe, because I hit him once. Did I hit him once at this point? I'm not sure. At any rate, he's done at least 8 damage to himself over the course of the 4th turn, and it really hasn't paid off well. When Rosticon's Rumble rotates out of Standard, I think that this Priest deck is really going to be hit hard, because while it will still have some good removal options, the ability to cast Mass Hysteria is so important to the deck, and I think that it just won't be able to survive through that. It'll have to take some major changes if it does survive. The Priest's only way of winning is through sheer amounts of control and presence all throughout the game with cards that have such massive effects as that, and without it, the Priest really has no path to victory that's reasonable. Opponent's taking a minute here. One of the big problems with Zoo Warlock that I've found is that it requires such a great deal of board control to make any progress. And while it's a fun deck to play, it's so difficult to actually get anything up and running against certain matchups that it can be not very rewarding. Here we went ahead and traded in his Knife Juggler to the Cultist, and then we handled everything else with our 5/5. That 5/5 is going to get some pretty insane value for us this game. I don't think he ever removes it. And it does kill multiple things with 4 power or attack, depending on your nomenclature. It does destroy multiple things with 4 toughness and 4 power, which is fantastic value since it can heal that damage right back up off of itself. It is really a good deal. And it never left the board. I was considering playing Bwansamdi here the next turn. I only had one other 1-drop in the deck to draw though, so it didn't seem like very good value, all things considered. So I decided to not do that. I decided to take a different route. The rush on that didn't really make sense to me, because he could just heal himself for that. Our opponent here, I don't believe our opponent really played around the Water Bearer's ability to heal himself or me in any way throughout this game. If I had given that minion rush, I definitely wouldn't have attacked the 5/5 with it. I would have saved the rush to kill off the Water Bearer, because the Water Bearer is a pretty big issue to deal with for the zoo archetype. Not being able to remove it directly with anything that a Warlock has, and it being able to heal for so many points can really throw off the game plan of the Warlock. And here is where we see the massive value of my 5/5. The opponent decides to double trade into my Akhmet, which just doesn't seem like a very good play. If he knew anything about this deck, he would know there's nothing really worthwhile to get with that, except maybe like a 2/7 rush minion. Definitely would have gone for the 5/5 there. Maybe it would have been pretty low value, but he could have thrown a 1/4/4 and one imp at it, and it would have survived. But here it just heals itself back up for 4, and we have a very strong defensive line against our opponent. The opponent has a lot of cards in hand, but on average their cards are very low value compared to ours. Also, we had the mass hysteria we had drawn that I was talking about, and that was gonna handle pretty much anything that he could play against us almost all the time. We had the Galakron follow up if anything got too vicious. We had Shadow Word Death, which most likely wouldn't see play in this matchup. It's part of the reason I wanted to change it out. But we're already strong enough against Zoo Warlock that it wouldn't be just because of this deck that I would change it out, but it would be a nice benefit if we added it in. So our opponent's taking a moment to make a decision here. Classes and schoolwork during this infection have been pretty outstandingly difficult for me. Not because they're necessarily hard or more difficult than usual, but because they're just not designed well for the situation. The 5/5 is about to trade into another 4/4, which is just going to be fantastic. It's going to heal itself back up. But classes are so dull, mainly because the teachers and the people who are in charge don't seem to know how to operate under the new style of things. Because the way the school works now is it's running through Zoom meetings, which I'm pretty sure that most people are aware of. Nice finish here with a void contract. It would have been a fun game if we had continued it. I probably wouldn't have killed him here, but he decided to concede. Maybe that's fair. I might have gone for lethal. I don't know. Either way, the limitations of the video environment really don't play well into my teachers' strengths, because most of my teachers are, well, professors rather, that's what they want to be called. My professors are much more talented in dealing with things in paper and pencil, and that's why almost every class that I have, I've been forced into just showing my work from my paper and pencil to them through my webcam, which is just a terrible experience in my opinion. The boomers really can't handle working with these types of machines. So here we are with our next game. We have a decent opening hand. Shadow Word Death, not the most ideal card to get, but Disciple of Galakron is always a very good turn 1 play, and we can move on and do a lot of removal afterward. We got a nice card off of it, 5-mana Pit Fighter, who can give a bonus. Not the best card in the world, but I would definitely take it over some of the other options. It's not a test subject or anything. So we begin the exciting matchup of two decks that take a while to get going, and that means a lot of passing over and over and over again. Doomsayer doesn't really do much for my opponent here, and I don't know what he expected me to do. Maybe he was just throwing it away, which would be a reasonable play. I had no reason to try and play anything into that, even though Forbidden Words on a Doomsayer is one of the funniest interactions in the game. 0 mana to destroy the Doomsayer is kind of brilliant. But besides that, I figured it would be much better to save it for a more high priority target. Doomsayer doesn't even really hurt me that bad. It kind of helps me in the sense that playing any game that goes long enough, I will eventually win with this deck, just because of the value of the hero power. Well, there are some decks that this loses to in the long games, but in general, most decks can't keep up with the Galakron hero power. Archmage Arugul here. This was a decent Shadow Madness. I checked to see if there's any way I could draw any cards, but it didn't look like that was a possibility, and the odds of me drawing a minion were actually fairly low with this deck anyway, so I just decided to go ahead and trade it off. But it is a lot more flashy to trade off with his golden Arugul. Anyway, this opponent's playing with a gold hero and an all-golden deck against my lowly old self, who can't even afford the second plague. So, I don't know. It is interesting being free to play in this game, because it really does teach you min-maxing to its finest. I could have played Disciple of Galakron here, but I figured the rush would be more useful than just waiting it out. When I just waited it out, rather than playing it out and just hoping to get a decent card off of it, which would definitely easily be removed. There's this golden legendary Luna's Pocket Galaxy. This guy having a fun game against him. I decided to go ahead and play my Convincing Infiltrator into an empty board, just to make it so that if he drew any threatening minions, they would be difficult to play, and force him to use some removal on it. Probably should have just played my Pit Fighter, but I figured I might be able to get some value out of it in the next couple of turns, especially with my charge minion. Or my Harrison Jones would have been a fair play as well, because this opponent's never going to have a weapon that we would have to worry about, to my knowledge. Again, I don't know the deck lists of these decks very well. That Thought Steal was a godsend with his 1 mana minions. It's kind of funny that I got a Zephyrus that I would almost certainly never be able to use, but the Sandbinder would be a nice 1 mana 2/4 for us. Not that I had any elementals, of course. Then our opponent sits there. We wait on him. I recently bought a new game, Lisa, that I'm probably going to be doing a little series about. I'm going to be recording myself playing all the way through it. It seems to be a decently fun game. It's a RPG that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. It's ancient, but it covers a lot of interesting ideas. It's very dark, and I've heard that it's extremely difficult. Kind of sounds like it's up my alley. I do play a lot of games that are considered decently difficult to play. His Reno the Relicologist here doesn't really do much. Just empties the board. I guess it does get rid of my Convincing Infiltrator, which may have been causing him some problems, but I don't really understand what it was going for there. Here we decided to go ahead and play our Harrison Jones, which would never find a target, but which would have a 5/4 body, as I talked about before. 5/4 is better than a 3/2 against this kind of deck. And while I was over here clicking about, my opponent decided to concede, facing the horrible wrath of my 5/4 for 5 mana. He decided that it was impossible for him to win and just conceded on the spot, which is why you run Harrison in your deck, honestly. I think it has a significant amount of value in that sense that people don't really recognize. When you're playing against opponents on the ladder, it's very difficult to overcome. So here we go. We're moving on to our next game. I believe this is the last game that I played for the day. And after this, I guess I'll be signing off, and we'll wait until I can make another video later. But we have a little bit of time left. You can look down there in the bar below and see that we have, 20 minutes left? So we have some time. Here's another mage opponent. Gotta love it. I was considering keeping Galakron here, but I decided against it just because even though it has good value in the longer games, I would rather draw into it and get my removal options early. That Plague of Death, not the kind of card you want to see in your opening hand, but eventually it could be useful. We got a turn 2 play out of our Galakron's Disciple, which is always nice. Our opponent Arcane's Breaths, our Galakrond's Disciple, meaning we each traded 0 cards for 0 cards, and 1 mana for 1 mana. Very nice for me. The longer the game goes, the better off I think I am generally. There are some decks that have inevitability, like I said before, but I think against a Dragon Mage, as long as I keep my Plague of Death and Mass Hysterias well used, I probably win most matchups, as far as I have understood from playing against them. Decided to go ahead and use my Thought Steal here, and I got a very good Thought Steal. I got a Tiamat, which could be very good later in the game, and I got a Zephrys, which most likely would never be activated, but in a value-oriented matchup, I would just save it until eventually it made some kind of progress. So I definitely did well on our opponent here. I got 2 cards that I don't have enough dust to craft, which is always fun. Fun using cards that you can't normally use, of course. And our opponent decided to use a Cone of Cold with a coin this turn, which I definitely didn't understand. I don't know what that was really trying to accomplish. It didn't seem like it did that much. But it did slow us down, but we're a very slow deck. That didn't really make a difference, I think. Our Cabal Shadow Priest that we got could be useful. Very few valuable targets to consider, but eventually it could just make a decent trade for us, or stealing a 2/2 for 6 mana is pretty good. 4 total stats lost / gained through it, and you get a 4/5. So it's kind of like a an 8/9 for 6 mana, which is pretty good. That Mind Flayer could be pretty nice here. When you're playing against dragons, there are definitely some big cards. Big Ol' Whelp is a small card, actually, all things considered. Here, I decided that since I had a second Sandhoof Waterbearer, I would go ahead and play it out and heal up for that 3, and attack the opponent's face for 1. The 4/5 isn't very good against the 5/5, but considering that we had a Shadow Madness, I figured that we could probably make some use of it. Tiamat would also not be a horrible deal. The next turn, Divine Shield Rush into it. Then our opponent made a power play on us that we weren't really prepared to handle, where they spent 6 mana to get a 4/4 and 2 4/5s with Divine Shield. Very difficult for us to overcome. I was deeply considering Mind Flayering one of the Taurens here, but I didn't decide to do that. Ultimately, I made a rather interesting play that I don't think was actually very good, but it did work out for me, strangely enough. I don't believe it was the best play, though. I think that maybe a Mass Hysteria might have been significantly better here. Coupled with the Pinnace, the Mass Hysteria would deal 2 damage with the frog. The spells would deal 2 damage with the frog across all the enemies, and we would get a really good use out of our Mass Hysteria, but ultimately I decided that that wasn't the correct choice, and for some reason, and I just healed at the end of the turn. I didn't even heal, did I? I didn't really do much that turn. It was a very weak turn for me. 7 mana heal pass is not what you want to be doing. Well, 7 mana deal 1 damage to a Divine Shield guy is not necessarily what you want to be doing. So our opponent had a good... I figured a Cabal Shadow Priest into this card would be a very good value, but at the same time that seemed like a very slow play. So I had to consider that our opponent had a lot of tempo up on me, and I decided to just go with the full clear here, as opposed to going for the longer term value. So I used my Shadow Madness on the 2/3. I didn't have any spells with spell damage. If I had had the Penance from the turn before, it would have been really nice. Gain back all that life I lost, but alas, you can't see into the future. So I took the 2/3 and I Forbidden Words the 4/4, cleared off the board, and passed the turn back to our opponent. We were looking pretty good. Had some pretty high value cards in our hand. Although it was definitely a slow hand, the Plague could make up for a lot of losses. Our opponent chose an interesting minion with this one. I don't know what choices he was given. I suppose he chose 4 power because as a priest, 4 is definitely a difficult number to deal with. And it would have helped if he had chosen something with 3 or with power greater than its health so that I could have mass hysteria, but I decided that see him out was the only real option here. Not my favorite choice, but I didn't really have very many options, so I went ahead and did the see him out clear and healed myself in the face. Because I figured having a 3-2 on the board wasn't worth it when I could eventually get a Pyroblast out of my Zephyrus the Great. Great guy he is, I've heard. So, our opponent Alexstrasza in my face, and I immediately started freaking out because being Alexstrasza in the face usually means you're dead. I drew a taunt, which may have helped quite a bit, and then I followed that up by a Sandhoof to try and recover some of our lost health, because I figured if they had enough burn to deal 15, maybe 20 was out of their reach. And I'm not sure if I survived that turn because of that. I did not go back over the plays that he made. I do not believe he had enough burn in his hand to deal with 20 health though. With 15 health rather. I think that I would have survived if I had played something else, which would have been very nice. Having a Mind Flayer on the 8/8 is always a good deal. 3 mana 8/8 is always bonus in my opinion. Flame Strike, definitely not great, but it did cost his entire turn, and he lost 4 health on his Alexstrasza. I played Devoted Maniac because we were looking for an answer to what he was doing. Played Psychic Conjurer because we were still looking for an answer. Anything that could deal 2 damage. Played that because there was a Penance still in my deck that could deal the damage we needed, but we didn't hit it. So we just traded in and played our Lightwell and hoped that we weren't dead. Luckily, we did survive this turn. I know that I might be spoiling that a little bit for you, but it was a very threatening Ironbeak Owl that came out and targeted. I jumped a little bit, but we did survive through that turn at least. Then our opponent played a Malygos, and we got very sad because you knew he was going to go for the Pyroblast or the Fireball out of that, which was not going to be good for our health. So we went ahead and took our Shadow Madness opportunity when it was given to us. 2/8 into an 8/8 is fantastic. 2/8 into an 8/2 rather. And then we took his Owl because I figured healing was just as effective as taking away 2 damage, and getting the 4/5 and the 2/1 over on my side of the board might be more advantageous in case he had any additional burn. I thought that our opponent was BMing me here with this Caligos because I figured 12 health was precisely enough for a mage to do that sort of thing. But they didn't follow it up with anything that was lethal to us, so I sighed a little bit at that. But our Mind Flayer rather, did finally find a fantastic target, and that Polymorph was very good to get rid of when we decided that we wanted to have ourselves a 4/12 as well. I made an interesting play here where I copied the 4/12 and then I penanced my own minion in order to ensure that he couldn't do anything to the 3/3 while I was there. Probably not the best play, because if he could do anything to the 3/3, he could do something to the 4/12 just as well, and it would probably involve Polymorph or something like that. But luckily our poor decision was not punished on the next turn. We got to keep our 4/12. Although the options for spells we could cast were pretty limited, since we had 1 dead Zephyrus in our hand, unless we wanted a 3/2 that did nothing. And we also had a whole bunch of removal that would get rid of our 4/12, which is just not ideal. Our opponent played a Kartuk Defender and a Doomsayer here to try and clear off our 4/12 because he was clearly lacking in removal. He Conjurer's Calling our 2/6, which may have not been the best play on his part, but the 2 6 mana cards that we got, the 2 5 mana cards we got out of it rather, were terrible. 5 mana 3/4 and a 5 mana 3/3. It was essentially one of the lowest rolls you could get, I believe. It was definitely not ideal. I don't know why he icicled my 4/10 there, but the Galakron draw was essentially what sealed this game. I decided to heal to get out of double Fireball range and then destroy all of his minions. And then we were set. We just started beating in his skull until he died, which is essentially what you want to be doing in every game of Hearthstone, isn't it? This is why I like playing Zoo. The entire game plays out like this. Cobra Necktie is an interesting name for an opponent. Come to think of it, I don't understand exactly what he was going for when he said it as his name. But then again, my name on my account is terrible. I got it when I was a youngin', as one might say, and I never updated it. And I'm not gonna pay $10 to change my name at this point, because I've already devoted myself to a free-to-play lifestyle. Psychopomp got a really funny result here. Not funny as much as it was strictly just a good card to receive. Considered attacking the 2/5, decided against it. Probably would have been a better decision to attack it, but ultimately it seemed like it was a minute detail, and the 5 damage to face could have been relevant later. And there's the fireball that we knew he got, so that probably would have killed us earlier. Then we get a Zephyrus coming in. I don't know exactly what he was looking for with the Zephyrus, probably a Pyroblast, but he didn't get it. He instead got a Shadow Flame, because I imagine Zephyrus didn't see the 2-turn lethal opportunity, and that essentially sealed the game, because he didn't have any way to recover from that unless he drew a Pyroblast, which I'm not even sure if he would run. But if he did, that would have been really unfortunate for us. But our reborn Water Bearer was going to pull his own weight here pretty hard. I don't know what our opponent was really going to be able to do against that. Well, the correct answer to that question is they decided to disconnect from the game. And while we're sitting here watching me fumble around trying to see if I had a lethal while my opponent was gone, I suppose it would be a good time to talk about the future of this channel. I don't have any specific plans for what I'm going to be doing with this channel here. I do want to continue making videos for it. Probably make some, by continue making videos I mean actually start making videos for once. And I would definitely like to progress into making videos about games that I enjoy playing, commentaries over them in this fashion, but I don't imagine they're going to get very popular, but it's something that I think could be fun to do. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to move on and do that here in the future, but we're not sure if that's a possibility. Besides that, I've recently been getting involved with certain games that I'm probably going to be spending a lot of my time doing here in the future. And I'll probably start recording those. As I said, I'll probably make a recorded playthrough of Lisa the Painful whenever I can get the recording setup correct. And besides that, I'm pretty sure I don't have too much going on in my gaming life, but that should be an interesting thing for the future of this channel, being able to upload playthroughs, and especially of games like that I've heard are so good. In addition to that, I'm most likely not going to be uploading videos in the way I used to, with the commentaries on YouTube politics and the bad editing. I just don't think that was very enjoyable to make. Those videos took a lot of time and didn't get very much attention. My most viewed video on the channel was one I clipped out of a video, and it took me 3 seconds to make, and it just was disheartening. Part of the reason that I left for so long. A lot of my old videos have been deleted. If you would like a copy of any of them, just message me. I have plenty. You could put it in the comments, or if you have any of my information, you can contact that. If not, I'll probably have to set up an account somewhere. Maybe I can make an email for this channel if I get enough requests for it, but I don't see that happening. Other than that, I've definitely enjoyed this kind of laid-back style, and if you think that it would be interesting to hear my commentaries over games that I'm playing, or maybe a live playthrough of games that I haven't got much experience on, go ahead and tell me. Besides that, I'll probably be signing off. Thank you, everyone, for deciding to listen through this whole spiel. I don't imagine very many of you would sit through it, but if you did, congrats. This has been Sir Nazarus, also known as the Founder, also known as Ender Rage 000. and I'll be signing off now. Talk to you later.